Hello and welcome to the New Europe Studios, where you can watch us make the news. Today I'm talking with Anna Nelberg-Dennis. She's the president of Eurocop, which is a European Confederation of Police. What they do is they represent the 500,000 members who are all serving police officers or in the security trade around that. They have members in 27 countries. And she's come to talk to us today about some of the problems that the police throughout Europe and beyond have been having under the strained financial circumstances. So, Ms. Nelberg-Dennis, could you perhaps just explain a little bit about what are the major issues facing the average policeman or policewoman?
Well, we have just recently sent out an open letter to European policymakers trying to highlight our problems and the current challenges we are facing today with the increased threats against police officers and the budget cuts. We also present some solution in that open letter.
Okay. And what are the main problems? Is it just your budgets have been cut, or is there more to it than just that?
No, but as you say, budget cuts have consequences, and I think it's time for our politicians to realize that, and I think they are not aware of how bad the situation is. And as I mentioned, the open letter, in that we also mentioned we need three things.
Yeah.
We need support, obviously, from our politicians, but we also need training and equipment, adequate training and equipment. That's the first thing that they cut down on when they're cutting budgets. And second of all, we need the adequate resources to do our job, and we need to enhance the cooperation between countries and cross-border cooperation.
So these are three things that you're looking for: is increased resources, training and equipment, the money to do the job, and more help with cross-border policing. Now, none of these seem particularly controversial. We would all want our police officers to be trained and to be equipped, particularly as we're facing dangers, particularly from terrorism, other things that we've not had before. We recall the alarmingly high number of serving police officers who have been killed in their duty. Most particularly, we've had the example of a very courageous policeman in France who was killed as part of the Charlie Hebdo. Now, when it comes to this, it's very easy for me as a journalist to go to a politician and say, do you support the police, the policemen on the streets? And they will say, of course I do.
Yeah.
But this doesn't always translate into action, does it?
No, unfortunately not.
Could you give me some examples of where there have been shortfalls? What are we looking at when we're saying that you need more resources, equipment and finances?
I was earlier mentioning about training. You can go to Sweden, where some areas have 1% of the total budget for training. That's the training budget, 1%. And they are even cutting in that. So, where we're supposed to get our training. I think it's important to remember that police officers are the first responders. What will happen the day when the police can't come to a place where something has happened? An attack or something? We are the first responders. And of course we need the best equipment, the best training in order to do our job. We are the one who sets out to protect Europe, to protect the citizen, and not to forget, to protect ourselves.
I mean, we're hearing stories that seem quite alarming about even police officers having to pay for their own petrol for cars. Is that?
Yeah, well, perhaps not pay for the petrol, but there is lack of petrol and a lack of functioning police cars. The police cars in some areas are actually falling apart, literally. What's leading to we have to walk instead, and they are telling the police officer, don't use too much petrol today because we don't have any money. You can only use this much. Yeah. And I mean, once again, we are the first responders. Is that the kind of first responders we want? And this have a knock-on effect. So if some country is sort of misbehaving or not providing the police officers with adequate resources, you have a knock-on effect on the whole EU. Yes. We're in this together, remember? And crime and criminals, they don't know any borders. They don't know any borders, and that's why it's so important that we have to increase the cooperations also between countries.
I think we can all argue that if we had an emergency situation and we called the police, we would like them to turn up quite quickly by car, hopefully, and not by public transport.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Now, I mean, also you've had the additional burdens in all sorts of requirements on police officers with the threat of terrorism and the extra vigilance that goes on, with, of course, the additional pressure of trying to almost stop the unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, you are asking, I mean, several years ago, these cuts have already showed consequences of the capacity of the police in Europe. And now it shows even more because we're constantly asked to do more with less. Mm-hmm. And now, on top of that, the increased terror threats and so on and we are facing a totally different criminality at the moment, which is really difficult to foresee which way it will go. And that's why it's so important that we are prepared, trained and equipped for this.
I mean, if there's one thing I could say I've noticed anecdotally from my life is that there is more international crime nationally, as well as cross-border. Now, what more resources do you need to help you tackle this, to tackle a job that our politicians have tasked you with doing?
But we need to be at the standard that we can do our job professionally, and that's not the fact today. The cuts have consequences. They have reduced the number of police officers in UK. As I mentioned, the training budget in Sweden. Belgium are retiring police officers, but they're not filling up with new ones. And there's hard regulations when it comes to how much overtime they can take on certain police stations. And you know, this is not the way. You can't save yourselves out of a crisis only. It's especially not with the police.
Yeah.
Security costs, and it must cost. And it's time to invest in the police. And I can't say to you we need X amount of euros or something, but we need the adequate resources to do our job professionally and to be able to protect ourselves as well, because we are the ones who are supposed to stand there in the front line, the first responders. And if we don't have the training, equipment and the resources to do it, well, I think we have a huge problem by protecting the citizens.
Well, I think that there's one issue there is, I mean, could I ask you, are the lives of police officers at risk because of these cuts?
But at one point you should say that, because if you have to buy your own bulletproof vests, I think, you know, and we know what kind of weapon arsenals they have, and of course it's always a risk. And you know, you can hear from the colleagues around that it's not so. I wouldn't say everybody's afraid to go to work, but because that's not true. We always have a risk in our work, and anything can happen. Every day you go to work, you don't know whether you're coming home or not, because anything can happen. But of course, the discussion has started with the increased risk about being a police officer. And on top of that, you ask yourself, so is it worth it? What do I get in my paycheck at the end of the month? Is it worth it, you know, for what I'm doing, to risk my life?
I think that's clearly, you know, an issue of concern, and when it comes to some officers not being able to afford bulletproof vests, then I think that most people who are watching this or reading this will realise that really is too far. That must surely be judged as unacceptable.
Yes, of course it is. It's completely unacceptable, and that is the equipment that should be provided by the employer, definitely, together with the training.
Yeah.
Training is really important.
Because when you're talking about training, it's not necessarily training to be a police officer, but it's training in health, in emergency first aid, in new equipment, and in
tactics. It's about shooting training, the shooting range.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, just so people are very, very clear, that the training you're talking about is the kind of repeated training that people need to do their jobs properly. Yes?
Yes, and I think it's important for people to understand that these attacks that we have seen in Paris, in Denmark, for instance, these are the attack that is not, well, at the first stage is met by the normal police officers on the street.
Yeah.
But they are not trained to take care for these issues. We have special forces within the police that are special. They train every day in order to maintain this competence in what tactic to use if a nuthead with a gun goes berserk somewhere. The normal police officers don't get this training, and this is what we are saying. In order to have the capacity all over the police force, and in also to be able to maintain a sustainable police force over time, because we don't know how long we're going to live in this society, in this kind of society with these increased threats. And I wish we didn't even have to sit here and discuss it. In the best of the world we wouldn't, but now we're here and we have to live with this now, and that means that we have to step up our police forces as well, so we can be sustainable over time to take care for this and tackle these things. That means increased training for all police officers, not only the special forces.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the financial resources and the cross-border communications, it just comes back to this thing, is you're asking to be supplied with a need to take on the tasks that have been given to you.
Yes.
And why, I mean, this open letter where you've been asking for these resources, have you had any responses so far?
It's been quite spread, on the other hand. Not so much responses so far, but we are expecting that definitely, because this can't go on. But it's been quite widely spread, especially around, UK has been very spread in UK, Sweden, Denmark. So it's this is important. This is an important message, and we're not going to give up.
No. What
the politicians are doing now, they're asking us for a Ferrari, but they are not. They are only paying for an old tractor, and that's, what you pay is what you get. And
because one of the ways we can make savings is in just cutting maintenance budgets. So you're working with radios that don't work quite properly, with cars, as you're saying. That
computer system that doesn't talk to each other, so you have to type in the same thing 10 times, and during the day it's quite frustrating. Takes the time from the police officer where he or she should be on the street rather than inside doing admin work. I mean, the list can be done long.
But when you approach the politicians who've given you these tasks and are demanding that you fulfill them, and you say, give us the resources and we will do the job, it sounds rather like Churchill.
Yes.
Speaking to America, wasn't it? What do they say?
They say it's a national issue and it should be sorted nationally. And I said, you know what, if it's a national issue and somebody can't handle it nationally, you're going to have a knock-on effect on your country as well. No. And if I could choose, this would be the solution. Police forces tell the politicians. The politicians give a list to the police forces. This is what we want you to do. We will write them an invoice and say, okay, we will deliver this. This is how much it costs. But now it's the complete opposite way, and that's not going to work.
No. Well, I think we can all understand that security, whether it's from terrorism or whether it's just from ordinary low-level crime, or whether it's for the many other jobs that the police do, that this does need financing. So we're very happy to let you explain your case and support you in this, and we can only hope that the politicians start, frankly, putting their money where their mouth is. Yeah,
they have to start to react. There is only a limit, and I said cuts have consequences, and security costs. Security costs, that's the simple thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we would like to be in a society that's worth protecting and has the people who will give those who are meant to protect us the tools they need for the job. Ms. Nelberg-Dennis, thank you very much for coming in and explaining the problems facing the 500,000 members you have in Europe in their job of trying to keep us all safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.